sometimes I think that, like, maybe children's time, I'm more just trying to entertain the adults in the room. And so I'm sorry if I was making too many jokes and maybe the kids didn't learn anything, but I think somebody was laughing, so I'm fine with that. So yeah, my name is Stefan Warner. I'm from Oklahoma. I live right now in the north, which is a little bit south of Oklahoma City. I go to Joy Mennonite Church. I've been going for about 3 years. I think I have a lot of things to say about CPT in Iraq, so I'm just going to go for it. And I hope that if people are willing or able to stick around after church and have lunch and ask questions if you have any, or we can just chat about whatnot. And if you feel like I skipped over anything or had any questions, yeah, please feel free to ask later. So I went to Iraq for 3 months with Christian Peacemaker teams. Christian Peacemaker teams just turned 25, so happy birthday to us. So yeah, and Christian Peacemaker teams is an initiative of Historical Peace Churches, Brethren, Quakers, Mennonites. Back in 1984, a fellow named Rhoads-Stecker gave a speech at the Mennonite World Conference, kind of asking how far are we willing to go as people of God's peace. What are we willing to sacrifice to end war? And so from that, CPT was born. I guess you could say CPT is like a living answer to the question he asked. And so we've been around for 25 years, and to be honest, CPT is an experiment. It's an experiment in truth-telling, active peacemaking, and trying to love our enemies. And we're learning as we go, and we're changing, and we will probably always be like that. So CPT started off late 80s. In the early 90s, CPT started out having some delegations to different areas where conflict arose, where conflict is. In Haiti, Palestine. Right now, we have teams in Colombia, Palestine, Iraq, and Canada. Canada, CPT is working on First Nations and land rights. Am I speaking close enough to the mic? People hear me? Okay. So yeah, that's what we call the Aboriginal Justice Team in Canada. I'll tell you a little bit more about Iraq in a minute. In Palestine, it's walking kids. CPT walks kids to school, so settlers don't fight the kids. They'll monitor checkpoints where when people are trying to go through checkpoints to go to school or work or whatever, and then be delayed for 2 hours. In Colombia, CPT accompanies campesinos, peasants, farmers who are generally facing eviction and displacement from giant transnational corporations that come in and try to take the resources. Especially lately, there's been a lot of privatization and neoliberal economics has made the situation in Colombia bad. A lot of human rights activists are killed there, and so CPT is walking along those groups and hoping to try to help people stay on the land or return to the land. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the Iraq team. So in 2002, CPT started in Iraq. They started off in Baghdad before the war started, the invasion started. Kind of with the idea that said CPT is mostly especially in 2002, was mostly from the West, mostly North American. Now CPT is growing, it's changing, it's becoming more of a global body, a global agency with a lot of. And the Colombia team is over half Colombians now. Palestine has Palestinians on it in Iraq. We just had our first Iraqi intern start. But yeah, in 2002, it was mostly saying, if our countries are going to bomb you and do violence to your country, we want this to stop. If we can't stop it, we'll be there with you. And if they bomb you, they'll bomb us too. And so that started. CPT was there. CPT started out doing nonviolence trainings, helped start a group called Muslim Peacemaker Teams. They're doing similar work. And then what CPT found, what they really needed to focus on, at the request of local families and local partners, was to document human rights abuses, especially relating to people being detained by the occupying forces, such as the U.S., Canada, and the Coalition of the Willing. So a lot of men were being detained, anywhere from like 15 up to who knows what age, and then these men would not be seen for quite a while. So families would come to CPT and say, I can't find my son, or I can't find my so-and-so, and CPT would try to help find this person. As CPT spoke more and more with people that were in these prisons, they found out there was a lot of human rights abuses and a lot of terrible things going on. You might have heard of the Abu Ghraib incident. CPT had a hand in that. We wouldn't really take credit for it and say, look what we, nobody really wants to be, I don't think anybody would want to brag and say, look what we found, but CPT had a hand in that. That was what CPT was doing in Baghdad. And then in 2005, I forgot to get out my phone to tell me what time I need to stop talking. I could talk until like 3 o'clock. Is that okay with everybody? Alright, so in 2005, 4 CPTers were kidnapped. 2 were CPTers who had been through training, and then 2 people who were just on a delegation who just decided they were going to go to Baghdad for 2 weeks and see what's going on, and then hopefully come back home. Well, 4 were kidnapped. 1 was from New Zealand, 1 was from Britain, 1 was from Canada, and 1 was from the United States. They were held for 118 days. They were kidnapped by a group called Swords of Righteousness Brigade. Never heard of before, never heard of after the incident. So they were held for 118 days. The 3 not from the U.S. were released after 118 days. The 1 man from the United States, Tom Fox, was found. He had been killed. And so that had never happened before in CPT history. People in Palestine, CPTers in Palestine have been beaten up, have been put in the hospital. There hasn't really been much. There's been deportations of CPTers in Colombia, but no real violence. So that was something new. And so immediately CPT evacuated, and our partners in Iraq, and I guess I would say a word about our partners in Iraq, is that CPT, as trying to be an anti-racist, undoing colonialism kind of identity, will only work in a country if they've been invited by a local body. We're not trying to get away from the older missionary model. We're going to show up and say, this is what you need to do, this. We're invited by local groups, and then we listen to these groups and take direction from these groups. With these local partners that we were working with in Iraq to hopefully reduce violence we're finding out. The sectarian violence and some of these some groups like Al-Qaeda, we're ceasing to target foreigners, and we're starting to more and more target Iraqis that were working with foreigners. So it's the opposite. So it's the total opposite of what CPT was there for. And said, we know what you do, and we think you're doing really good work. So instead of just going back home, you should check out the north. You should go to the north of Iraq, and especially a city called Suleimania. And I just put a little heart there on the map, and I wrote Suli. So that's where CPT ended up going. And a little bit about Iraq politics is majority of the south of Iraq is Arabic speaking, and it's under the guise of the Iraqi central government. Up towards the north, it's Kurdish, and there's an area called the Kurdish Regional Government. It's a semi-autonomous zone that is still a part of the Iraqi central government, but they make their own rules and whatnot. So CPT moved to the north, and this is like the intro to Kurdistan. Kurdistan is in southeastern Turkey, like most of western Iran, and just a little bit of Syria, and then obviously northern Iraq. And so the Kurdish people are like an Indo-European people, speak a different language. They're not Arabic, but they've been repressed for quite a while. Following the Ottoman Empire, after the Ottoman Empire fell, different nation states were broken up. Okay, this is going to be a nation state, this is going to be a nation state. Kurdistan was supposed to have its own nation state, but the Turks said, no, we don't want that to happen. And the British had built a lot of roads in Kurdistan already. So Kurdistan was split up in different areas. It was good for other people, it wasn't good for the Kurds. And Turkey, process of Turkification happened, trying to assimilate the Kurds into Turkey, they wouldn't let Kurdish people speak their language in public. No Kurdish education. You couldn't teach Kurdish language to folks. Every day at school, Kurdish kids would have to say, my father's a Turk, my grandfather's a Turk, and I'm proud to be a Turk. Which maybe sounds silly, but we know now, say, as folks living in the U.S., assimilation, these schools of residence, when taking kids from indigenous families and sending them off to other schools to try to get them to be white. We know now that that's terrible. That was what was going on with this process of Turkification. In Iraq, during Saddam's reign, there's something called Project Tonfall, which is just basically a genocide program. It killed about 180,000 Kurds, men, all men, killed a lot of older women. The only people that didn't die were young women who were sold into slavery. And then Halabja happened in the late 80s. Saddam sent planes to north. And Halabja is near the Iran border. And there was some resistance fighters that fought Saddam that were near Halabja, but closer to Iran. He sent some planes, and they dropped chemical bombs on Halabja. Around 5,000 people died in a matter of days. At the time, Saddam and the U.S. administration were allies. So the U.S., knowing that Iraq had done this and it was Saddam's fault, tried to blame it on Iran to try to make Saddam look like a good guy. That's politics for you, I guess. One man I met, one man, a friend of ours, a partner of ours in Iraq, a Kurdish man, his name's Khalid. He's from this town called Rania, which is right here. It's about maybe 45 minutes away from the border of Iran. He said to us, he goes, besides CPT, he said, the mountains are the only friends of the Kurds. So it's pretty depressing. Kurdish people are they're very happy and they're very hospitable despite this opposition and repression they've faced over the years. So, yeah, and in Iran, like, I don't really think I need to go into it. There's misery for most people, but the Kurds along the region are especially not doing so hot.